Now, know this, everybody else has been canonizing Senator Byrd. I'd like to humanize him a little bit, because I think it makes him more interesting and makes his service all the more important. There are a lot of people who wrote these eulogies for Senator Byrd in the newspapers, and I read a bunch of them, and they mentioned that he once had a fleeting association with a Ku Klux Klan. And what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. He was a country boy from the hills and hollows of West Virginia. He was trying to get elected. And maybe he did something he shouldn't have done, and he spent the rest of his life making it up. And that's what a good person does. There are no perfect people. There are certainly no perfect politicians.
Today, our country has lost a true American original, my friend and mentor, Robert C. Byrd. Senator Byrd was a man of surpassing eloquence and nobility, and I will remember him for many things. I will never forget his devotion and his friendship in that critical time. It is almost impossible to imagine the United States Senate without Robert Byrd. He was not just its longest serving member, he was its heart, its soul, and its historian. From my first day in the Senate, I sought out his guidance, and he was always generous with his time and his wisdom. I admired his tireless advocacy for his West Virginia constituents. As Secretary of State, I continued to rely on his advice and counsel. I've been grateful for the support he provided as a leader of the Appropriations Committee.
Race relations.
They're much, much better than they've ever been in my lifetime. I think we, this is my personal opinion, I think we talk about race too much. I think those problems are largely behind us. We talk so much about it that may help, I think, create somewhat of an illusion. There are white niggers. I've seen a lot of white niggers in my time. I'm going to use that word.
But we also have to have an organized effort against gangs, just as in a previous generation we had an organized effort against the mob. We need to take these people on. They are often connected to big drug cartels. They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we have to bring them to heel. And the President has asked the FBI to launch a very concerted effort against gangs everywhere.
There's not much that we can do to stop the violence against us.
Well, if that is
a conversation that I push back.
I understand. I understand what you're saying.
Also respectfully.
Yeah. Well, respectfully, if that is your position, then I will talk only to white people about how we are going to deal with the very real problems.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean.
Well,
but like what I'm saying is, what you just said was a form of victim blaming. Right? You were saying that what the Black Lives Matter movement needs to do to change white hearts is
no, I'm not talking about. Look, I don't
change.
believe you change hearts.
In 1856, the election was a three-way affair between Democrat James Buchanan, American Party candidate Millard Fillmore, and John C. Fremont, representing the fresh-out-of-the-box Republican Party, otherwise known to Democratic hecklers as the Black Republican Party. That was a racial slur used by the Democrats since the Republican Party was created specifically from disaffected Whigs in order to combat slavery. That's why the Republican Party was formed. You see this flag that modern Democrats try to pin on Republicans? It was invented, as was the entire Confederacy, because Democrats walked out of the Union, Because once a Republican president had been elected, slavery was finished in America. Now that's why the person perhaps most singly responsible for ending slavery in America, the brilliant and courageous Frederick Douglass, once wrote, quote, "I'm a Republican, a black, dyed-in-the-wool Republican, and I never intend to belong to any other party than the party of freedom and progress." Don't believe me? Look it up. I hate to break it to you, but it was defeated Democrats that started the Ku Klux Klan, and it was these same former and then once again Democrats that created in the years right after the Civil War two modern institutions, gun control and marriage licenses. Gun control was enacted by Southern Democrats in order to keep guns out of the hands of newly freed black people. And marriage licenses, you know, the idea that the government could tell people who could marry whom, was invented by Democrats to prevent black people from marrying white people. Don't believe me? Look it up. All of those lynchings, those were Democrats. The first black senators and representatives, they were all Republicans, including these two men. Republican Hiram Revels, the first black member of Congress, and Joseph Rainey, who became pro tempore Speaker of the House of Representatives and who received death threats from Southern Democrats for his efforts to suppress the KKK by force. Charming people, these Democrats, aren't they? It was Southern Democrats that wrote the Jim Crow laws that segregated the South in the century after the Civil War, and it was the post-Reconstruction elections of these Southern Democrats that were responsible for colored-only drinking fountains and colored-only cafeteria spaces and all the rest. When those attack dogs were unleashed on black children trying to go to school in the South in the early 1960s, they were unleashed by Democrats like Bull Connor, Lester Maddox, and George Wallace. And when those fire hoses were turned on peaceful black protesters, those orders came from those same Democrats. So, why does black America vote so solidly Democratic? Well, the Democrats will tell you that the teams switch sides. You know, I didn't happen to get that memo. You know, the memo saying that all the racists now have to leave the Democratic Party and become Republicans, and all of the slavery-hating Republicans have to suddenly join the hated party of the Confederate battle flag, the KKK, and Jim Crow. I didn't get the memo because the memo doesn't exist. No one switched sides. The entire idea is ridiculous. It didn't happen, but something did happen. There was a switch, all right. And it was a switch masterminded by the great Democratic champion of black America, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Realizing that the South was emerging from its racist past to start voting Republican, he knew the game was over, and then he had an epiphany. Republicans and Democrats didn't switch sides, but the Democrats most certainly did switch strategies. And that switch in strategy can best be summed up by a direct quote from Democratic President Lyndon Baines Johnson, who said in the presence of two Southern governors, and I quote, "I'll have those n***s voting Democratic for the next 200 years. And so far, he has. Because that was the new strategy for the Democrats, you see, and it's worked like a charm. Buy the votes of black America with handouts. You know, just enough to keep them coming back every 2 years. It's a Democratic vote plantation is what it is. And black America is enslaved to it as thoroughly as they were when they were slaves under Democratic politicians and policies, as we've just seen. The Democrats have hired, and at sub-minimum wage, I might add, black America to vote for them in exchange for crappy housing, crappy food, crappy EBT cards, and crappy Obama phones. And if you're a black American who's wondering why things just get worse and worse for black America, well, your answer is that when it comes to your Democratic benefactors, you're not a customer. You're an employee. You're a minimum wage employee. We Republicans find this entire entitlement slavery disgusting. We want no part of it. The Republican Party was formed in opposition to slavery of any kind, and it remains that way to this day. So why haven't you heard about this horrible tale that belongs to that donkey? Well, it's because of what my friend and colleague Andrew Klavan calls the Democratic ring of power. It's the press, or in Andrew's words, they're precious. Like the ring of power, it grants Democrats the power of invisibility. The power to come back again and again and again with their policies of economic failure and racial slavery, secure in the knowledge that no one will ever see what they did the last time they tried it. It's kind of a shame about the internet, because now all of you can go and look all of this up for yourself.
Where you're talking common sense to them, but they just can't hear it because they're stuck on Donald Trump's a racist and I can't vote for a racist because their whole identity is about they're good and they're not racist. That's their possession, is being obsessed with race, which is the essence of being a racist. And I've got to say that a whole new generation of people were not being brought up like that. But that's all been hijacked now by the multicultural Marxist, and they are using race to control people just like the KKK did in the South, and it is shameful. I mean, I am really ashamed of Democrats and how far they've sunk. I've been a big critic of Republicans. Everybody knows that.
Donald Trump last week went to Milwaukee because of the rioting behind a police shooting of a young African-American male by a black officer. And the city was being burned down in certain parts of the black community by protesters. So Donald Trump decided to go to Milwaukee and speak about the conditions of America and why he felt black people should vote for him. He even went on to lay out reasons why he felt we should. Let me say this to the brothers and sisters who listened and watched that speech. We may not like the vessel that said what he said, but I ask us to truly examine what he said, because it is a fact that for 54 years, we have been voting for the Democratic Party like no other race in America, and they have not given us the same loyalty and love that we have given them. We as black people have to re-examine the relationship.
I agree.
Where we're being pimped like prostitutes, and they're the big pimps pimping us politically, promising us everything, and we get nothing in return. We got to step back now as black people and say we got to look at all the parties and vote our best interests.
Look, I couldn't agree with you more, Quinell. I couldn't agree with you more.
I do want to express thanks to you, Donald Trump, for being with us tonight. We need your building skills, your gusto, your rent package for people on Wall Street who represent diversity. And we thank you for coming tonight. Let's give Donald Trump a big hand. A big hand for Donald Trump, who's an effective builder of building for the builder of people. Last year, he was a part of our workshop, of our panel workshop on what are the challenges and opportunities. And so this, a year later, Donald Trump, for a few minutes, challenges and opportunities to embrace the underserved communities. Donald Trump.
I will tell you, a large percentage of the people, and especially in construction, that are building these great jobs are black and minorities, and I'm very proud of it. We have close to 25%, and I think the number's going up, and they do a great job. There are no better builders than we have in New York, and a big percentage of that is black and minority folks. So I just want to thank everybody in the room for being here. I look forward to some questions, and then I don't know how we're ever going to leave this building today, because if you look outside, it is terrible, but we'll figure a way. There's always a way, and thank you, Jesse, and congratulations.
Case in point, how many times does Donald Trump have to disavow David Duke and the Klan's support for his campaign before the mainstream media's disinformation piranhas smell fresher meat, to get yet another bellyful of lies while ignoring the real issues that matter to most Americans?
Will you unequivocally condemn David Duke and say that you don't want his vote or that of other white supremacists in this election?
Well, just so you understand, I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I didn't even know he endorsed me. David Duke endorsed me? Okay. All right. I disavow, okay? I don't mind disavowing anybody, and I disavow David Duke.
I disavow, Alex.
Wait a minute, John McAfee. Why won't you disavow? You're seeing him not disavow, folks. I'm going to ask you one more time, or Paul Ryan's going to have to come out and give a speech. Now, he done it 10 times by Paul Ryan's speech. He's done it over 14 as of last night. And I want you to disavow 14 times and disavow the way I want. Go ahead.
I want to just continue to say one phrase over and over. My wife is black. My wife is black. And if I keep saying that, eventually...
Not good enough. Say I disavow.
They spoke with some Trump supporters. Let's play what they said.
David Duke and people like that, they come out of out from under the rocks all the time around this time this year. It got nothing to do with Donald Trump. We all Americans. I think we need to stop with all the racist stuff and the race baiting. Like me and my friend right here, we just met today. We was talking. You know, we got to stop with the racist stuff and this, that. We all Americans, man. And nobody paying David Duke no mind.
Clearly, let me just be clear here. Obviously, the majority of Donald Trump supporters are not African American. I don't know how many African Americans were in that building. But
he is whipping up and tapping into and pushing buttons that are very, very frightening to me and frightening to a lot of people. I know how he talks about terrorism. The Klan is a terrorist organization that has killed
a leftist terrorist organization.
You can put whatever label you want. That's your game to play.
No, that's your game to play.
No, they're not. We're not going to play that game.
Most people still don't realize that the Democratic Party actually created the Ku Klux Klan.
Paul Ryan this week said, quote, if a person wants to be the nominee of the Republican Party, there can be no evasion and no games. They must reject any group or cause that is built on bigotry. He was talking about you.
But I've rejected. How many times do I have to reject? I've rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. From the time I'm 5 years old, I rejected them. I put it on Twitter last week. How many times? You know, it's an amazing thing with Twitter. I have 6 million, more than 6 million, and I have another 6 million with Facebook. I have like 13 or almost 14 million with Instagram. When I put out a minor message, everybody picks it up. Donald Trump just tweeted something very unimportant. Let me just explain. When I put out that I reject KKK and David Duke, nobody picks it up. You know why they don't? Because they don't want to pick it up. They pick it up. You pick it up. Everyone else picks it up. You saw simultaneously, practically at the same time. They don't want to pick it up. Now, I have been asked this question so many times. I have rejected it so many times. In fact,
what did you think about Ryan saying that, though? That's, I guess, my question.
I don't know. Well, don't forget, he's getting a lot of his information from you guys. So when I tweet about a rejection, almost right after that show ended, because maybe I wasn't clear or something. I mean, how many times do I have to say it? Don't forget, I told CNN when Chris Christie endorsed me, a very good endorsement, and one of the questions, that question was asked, and I rejected it there. That news conference was like a day before. So I said to myself, how many times do I have to reject or disavow?
Let me ask you this question. What about David Duke is saying to his supporters and followers, vote for Donald Trump. White supremacists are saying, vote. Do you want those votes?
No, I don't want them, and I don't want him to say it. I can't help if he says it, but I don't want it, and if he says it, John, if he says it, he says it, okay? Do I want it? No.
And you want the supporters?
No, I don't want anything.
What do you think of white supremacists, by the way?
I don't like any group of hate. Hate groups are not for me. But I've said this before. The press hates me to say it. They just don't want to pick it up.